Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sport and Limerick Soccer Podcast. Unfortunately, we're down one man tonight in our usual contributor, Jason O'Connor, but we hope to have him back as soon as possible. We have the ever-dependable Noel O'Connor here with us to keep the show on the road with Sport and Limerick this evening. Noel, I suppose we'll start off with Treaty United's defeat last week, second defeat of the season to Cabinteely in Stradbrook. It was certainly an off-night in performance for Treaty, considering the weeks that preceded it. Cabinteely were full worth for the win, really.
God, they were, yeah. It was a bad night at the office for Treaty. They seem to be very off form and off colour. Everyone seemed to be afflicted with the same malaise, really. I suppose the only guy that I thought kind of battled away was Anto O'Donnell. Everyone else looked a bit out of sorts to me. But you'd have to commend Cabinteely as well. They were certainly a very motivated group. They seemed to have their homework done in how to deal with Treaty. You know, we spoke about their experienced backroom group, and it certainly shone through the way they played. They played nice and deep. They didn't come out and let Treaty get in behind them. They counter-attacked really quickly, used their pace, particularly in the wings, and they got themselves into great positions, particularly around the centre midfield. I thought in the 1v1s, they seemed to be constantly running at Clyde O'Connell and Jack Lynch, who looked very isolated and forlorn figures during large swathes of the match. So overall, it was a commendable performance by Cabinteely, but certainly disappointing one for Treaty.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned obviously that Clyde and Jack endured a tough night. There was a lot of players with low centre of gravity, quick feet, a lot of pace in the Cabinteely team, quite direct as well, as you mentioned, in their running and isolating our midfielders. Obviously as well, that it's stretched to maybe the full-backs, Charlie Fleming and Mark Ludden, having a very tough night as well, Noel. It's also, look, it's not going to be a worry, I suppose, but we failed to win on the road this so far in the first round of games. Tommy Barrett was very quick to dismiss that tonight when I said did it worry him or frustrate him that we hadn't picked it up? Would you think that that's too early to be talking like that?
I think it is, and to be honest with you, the situation that Treaty are in terms of their inexperience, and that I thought it was a bit of an advantage to them to be away to the likes of certainly Galway and Bray. Was the first game. It was a big game. We knew that Bray would have been one of the front runners, and I suppose it's easier to set up away from home, makers of hard to beat, you know, and the fact that they have those teams at home now in the second round, the Bray Wanderers, the Galways, the Shelburnes and the UCDs, there'll be a little bit of onus on them maybe to come out and play a bit, you know, because that's what you do when you're at home, and it'll bring its own kind of problems, if you like, for them. So I wouldn't really read too much into their home form. Look, there were some very commendable performances while they didn't win. You know, they were excellent against Shelburne away. They were excellent against Galway away, you know, just to name two. The first game against Bray as well, they were full value for the point. But, you know, certainly the second series is going to bring its own challenges to them because, you know, I think the Bray team, I know we'll be talking about it in a while, will be a different side, I think, than the Bray side they met on the opening day of the season.
Yeah, and also as well, Noel, it just shows you, I suppose, that the cautious approach coming from the management team of Treaty is definitely the right approach. It was evident from last Friday because, and when I say cautious approach, I mean in saying that we take it game by game, because if you look at it, we finished off the first round of games. There was obviously huge positivity around the city and county, you know, great results, you know, picking up points against reputable sides away from home. But then it's funny, like one bad night and one set of results going against you, like last Friday, and they found themselves joint third or fourth, and then you're gone to seventh place at the end of the first round of games, which is actually, I can tell by the players' reactions, even though they're pretending not to say it, does frustrate them that is the case. That's what they have to show for on the standings.
Yeah, and I suppose it reads into what we say, and people don't really get it. You know, it's a tough league. And the League of Ireland is a tough league, whether you're in the Premier Division and the First Division. And you're right, with all the positive results and performances that they've given, you know, they're still sitting in seventh place. Now, obviously, the upside of that, you're looking and say, well, they're 3 points off second place. And it is a very, very tight league. And, you know, the reality for Treaty is that they certainly need to keep in touch. I mean, a playoff place would be a massive achievement this season. And as long as they're within striking distance of that 5th place, for as long as they can keep that towards the end of the season, it'll certainly be a worthwhile performance. But certainly, looking at the second series now with, Bray coming, you've Shelburne coming to the Marcus Field, you've Galway coming to the Marcus Field. I think they're going to be a lot stronger than they were, say, when Treaty met them, and it's important that they kind of get back on track and get back to form as soon as possible.
Yeah, you mentioned Bray. Obviously, Bray have hit the ground running hard in the last few weeks. They took their time to get to the season, or to get to the pitch of it this season. They had a lot of draws. They weren't losing many games either, that has to be said. They had a lot of draws and they were tough to beat. They certainly are tough to beat because they're the best defence in the division with only 7 goals conceded, marshalled by Aaron Barry, who was a very good player for Derry City as well. And he's backed with a lot of experienced players around him too, Noel. It's going to be an exceptionally tough game. And as you said, probably a different animal from the one we faced at the Carlisle grounds on the opening day, whereas you mentioned at the time you can catch teams on the hop on the opening day of the season.
Yeah, I think so. And I suppose they've kept 5 clean sheets. They're looking for their 4th win in a row. So obviously their last 4 or 5 games, they've certainly hit form. I suppose they are hard to break down, but outside, I think they beat Cabinteely 3-0. They haven't scored a lot of goals either. Even in those victories, they really put to the pin of their collar last Friday night against probably a better performing Wexford side, with a new manager and a new player coach in, but they still managed to nick the win. So I think it's going to be a really, really tough game. I see Gary Shaw still isn't 100% right. I saw him come on against Cove a few weeks ago in the last 10 minutes. I see he came on for Bray on 55 minutes on Friday night. So he's obviously not fully fit yet, but they had Joe Doyle to thank for a well-taken finish from close range against a very resilient Wexford side last Friday night.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose in the opening game of the season, one thing that was noted was that you had Conor Clifford that dropped very deep for possession a lot of times, Noel, and was kind of looking to spray the balls to either the fullbacks or the wingers. But in a tight ground like the Carlisle grounds, a lot of those balls were then overhit. It didn't really suit where you were playing. Tommy mentioned it tonight when I was speaking to him that he thinks the Markets Field will suit Bray more. I certainly do think so as well. Obviously, the surface is very good for a football playing team, but it's also very wide as well, and they can expose those spaces too if they're allowed to.
Yeah, I think you're right. And in Brandon Kavanagh, they have a guy as well who's in the final third of the pitch who's capable of doing that, and he seems to be coming into a bit of form as well. And I suppose what will worry Tommy, what certainly would worry me, particularly on the Cabinteely game last week, was the torrid time that the 2 full-backs had as well. I know we mentioned Clyde and Jack having their own difficulties, but Charlie Fleming, he seems to be struggling a little bit. Certainly he hasn't come back to real form since his suspension, and particularly in the last 10 or 15 minutes of games, he seems to really struggle in terms of his fitness. He hasn't seemed to got to the pitch, but most worrying of all, I thought, was the torrid time that Mark Ludden got. We hadn't seen that really all season. He'd been so consistent and so comfortable there. He didn't seem to be ever under much pressure, but you do feel that other clubs will look at say the success that Cabinteely had last week, and certainly one of them will be to go into 1v1s against Treaty. And I'd in the Cabinteely fullbacks, I thought they did a real good job on the Treaty widemen as well, particularly Zach O'Neill, a right back. Now, we do know that Matt Keane is more of a central midfielder, but certainly he's a right-footed player playing on the left. And Zach O'Neill certainly showed him inside a lot and made him play the ball backwards and sideways, which showed that they obviously had their homework done there.
Yeah, certainly. And that kind of brings me to my next point, Noel. Ed McCarthy and Matt Keane are very workmanlike players out on the wide. I know Jason O'Connor flagged this at the very start that both of those players are either number 10s or central midfielders respectively, playing out in the wing, trying to do a job, and they have done that very well for the first few games of the season, especially in the defensive sense, sitting in and helping the rest of their team and working hard. But do you think, obviously you've Joel Coustrain, who's been lively when he's come off the bench twice, has been directing his running. Dean George showed glimpses of it. You'd almost be desperate to see almost both of those players in those positions without being too expansive, I suppose, in the next few weeks, if that was possible at all. Yeah,
certainly, particularly Dean George. I thought he was really good in that position. on the left-hand side against UCD, certainly for an hour, and it was his first game. And just, we were hoping to see him again there. And I don't think you have to be that expensive on both sides of the pitch, but you certainly need to be on one side. And if you did have the likes of Dean George there, in that expensive role, you're thinking on the other side of the pitch, can you just be solid and workmanlike, if you like, and get, even if you're looking for deliveries, can the fullback create those deliveries, even if he's overlapping the wide player who isn't a natural wide player, if you like. But something I think that they need to work on, if they are going to have those two players playing again, is they certainly need to tuck in and give their two centre midfielders a dig out, particularly when their central attacks coming down the middle, because there was no sign of them when, Jack and Clyde were kind of exposed and guys were running at them and going beyond them, taking on the two centre halves. So plenty of food for thought, I think, for the Treaty manager and backroom staff this week. That they certainly have a body of work to do. I thought Cole Strain did quite well again, and I do think, from what I've seen of him, certainly this year, that he probably has a bit more to offer in the middle. I know, in fairness to Sean McSweeney, is very good there as well. And the experiment of playing him up front, even though it was only for 10 or 15 minutes last week, didn't seem to create anything worthwhile. But there's still maybe a body of thought, maybe that Cole Strain, his best work for Treaty in the future may come from playing in a central role as opposed to a wide role.
I suppose we got an insight into that in the fact that Tommy did bring him on in that area, or shift him into that area later in the game in an attempt to create something. Obviously, Noel, when we played Bray at the very start of the season, it was literally ultra defensive stuff. Try and get out of there with a point, build confidence, build momentum. I think many people will probably, considering the home form Treaty have shown, many people will probably be expecting a different approach in terms of a slightly more adventurous approach this Friday night at the Marks Field, but that also carries its dangers, as Tommy will be well aware.
It absolutely does. And this is, what we said earlier on. Obviously, the away trip is something else, but you're kind of going there with a siege mentality. It's a bit harder to create that when you're at home. There is a bit of an onus on the home team always to come out and play and go on the front foot and try and get up, to try and get ahead in the game. Now, from the performance last week, you would be thinking that, you're saying that it's just an off night, that people will be very determined to erase last week, individually and as a group, and that they'll be very well motivated this week, and they'll really go for broke as such, which is something that you certainly like to see. So there's obviously a few question marks since last week, and you would think that, within that player group, they're talking amongst themselves and say, look, last week was unacceptable, and we can't replicate that performance again this week. So you would be hoping to see a very much different and resurgent Treaty performance this weekend. Yeah,
and Kieran Hanlon looks like he has officially shaken off the groin injury. The Treaty backroom team are expecting him to line out on Friday night. There is massive concerns. It looks like Clyde O'Connell and Sean McSweeney may miss out, particularly Clyde O'Connell. There's a severe doubt over him, Noel. In saying that, there's players there on the substitutes bench, and likes of Edo Dwyer even coming back into that'll be desperate to play. It's certainly not all negative when you lose players, because some of those players will be itching to get a goal because they haven't really had a massive amount of opportunity, considering how well the team has done in the first weeks of the season.
Yeah, I agree. And look, there's probably a case maybe if Dean George is fit to bring Matt Keane into the middle. Colin McNamara, I think, he's certainly done well. I think he played an hour, did well for an hour. Was it against UCD a few weeks ago? I wouldn't be too bothered, if you like, starting him. I don't think there's a case for putting guys on the pitch that are injured. I think Clyde obviously was struggling early on in the game, and he's the kind of player then, if he is struggling, then there is a danger that he'll pick up another yellow card or maybe a red card, because he'd be inclined to lunge at people, when he's in trouble in that. So, and I think you need to show a bit of belief in those guys as well. Look, obviously they've trained away, and if they're looking at guys that are being picked every week, even though they are painfully struggling, they're only 80% or 70 or 80 or 90%. think it sends out the wrong message. I'd have no doubt. Thought, in fairness to Ed O'Dwyer, I know he was only on for a short time, but he seemed to do very, very well. And he certainly has experience. And look, they're going to be chomping at the bit as well. So maybe it is a week just to freshen up a little bit and give these guys their heads and let them out on to the paddock.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the last game for a couple of weeks, Noel. And I know, every team will say that they'll be happy enough to go into a break now. But particularly Treaty, that in fairness to them, as you and Jason both mentioned that you don't like the term amateur with League of Ireland teams, because the lads are training at least 3 times a week as well as playing a game. And obviously you've got your recovery sessions, your physio, so you're almost full time in some ways without the morning sessions, I suppose, in the commitment levels. But considering the start of the season, the hectic nature of the start and everything, I think the 2 weeks will break where they might have a few days off in between will probably be well earned and probably good timing as well.
Yeah, I think so. Look, there's obviously guys carrying knocks and niggles and they haven't played at the level before. We said about the toughness of us and the relentlessness of it. You're training, as you said, 3 days a week. You're traveling every weekend. Every minute of the game is tough. You have to be at it mentally and physically. Guys do pick up knocks, and I'm sure there's more than Clyde and Sean McSweeney carrying a few knocks, and it's it's vital that if they can to get a positive result this weekend, because the one great thing about a break is if you win, you have that good feeling for a couple of weeks before the next game, and if you don't win, or you're carrying that disappointment around with you until the next game. But they'll just have a few days to recover. I think it's vital that they don't switch off totally. There's obviously guys that need to work on their fitness as well, in that break, and it's very important that they use that break wisely and don't think that we've a week off, so let's go on holidays, because there ain't any holidays when you're playing in this division.
Yeah, it's certainly too early to be thinking like that after just a third of the season gone. And a long one to continue. I know Jason isn't here to battle with Noel, but I'm going to push you anyway for a prediction for Treaty United and Bray on Friday night. A score prediction, please.
Right, but before that said that, I just want to quash any rumours that Jason was actually suspended for tonight. He hasn't received any suspensions, and he certainly was available.
No, he was. What would we say? He kept that for on the field. He's not suspended off the field anyway. Yeah. So
I suppose, look, and probably a little bit of my heart ruling my head here, but I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. While Bray haven't really conceded a lot of goals, they haven't scored a huge amount either, and I think that Treaty will be smarting from last week. And in fairness to them, up to last week, their performances have been pretty good. They go from good to very good, and hopefully they'll bounce back this week with a good performance and a really important point, which will stand them in good stead going into the break.
Yeah, I certainly hope you're right, Noel. I'm just looking here. I forgot that obviously normally I do one game each, but you're going to be getting all 4 of the other games and a grilling on them anyway this evening. I suppose we'll start off with Shelburne and Galway. That was obviously the first game ended in a 0-0 draw. Shelburne came out of there with a great result out of AMD's Park, considering they had a man sent off, Glenn McCauley, early in the first game. Galway are going there now. Shells are high flying. Have great players come off the bench. Galway, even though they won last week against Wexford, they were very close to a 0-0 draw, although Wexford had a bounce with Ian Ryan going in maybe. Where do you see this going? This is probably a bit of a pressure game for Galway, because, if you were to predict it, you'd probably think about a Shells win.
You would think about a Shells win, and it was actually Galway and Cork last weekend, with Galway getting a late equaliser below on Turner's Cross after being down to 10 men. So again, a real positive result for them, and just showing that resilience. While they're not firing on all cylinders, they're still hanging in there. And we're kind of waiting for them to hit form. It still hasn't happened. Like Bray, we were waiting for them to hit form, and now they've 3 wins on the bounce. But I'd actually go for a win for Shelburne. I just think there's more goals in that Shelburne group, and they seem to be on great form. Particularly, a fantastic win for them last week against UCD, and they'll be really on a high this week. And I just feel that they might have too much goal threat for Galway, and I'd go for a Shelburne win there.
Yeah, and then to move on to Cove hosting Cork, obviously Cork won the first game between these sides. It turns across 2-1. Now Cove had great chances on the night and should probably have got at least a draw going on the chances created. The season has ended up being quite poor, the start of it, to Cork, although they got a recently good result against UCD as well, and obviously beating Wexford. It's a funny one, Noel, in that, you know, if Cork win, that really kind of almost condemns Cove to a season where you're battling it out in the bottom 3 or 4, and obviously then it'll have, other teams will have worries about, well, Cork could hit form, you know, being a full-time side. That's always the worry in the back of the minds of the likes of Treaty, is that Cork will hit form at some stage.
Yeah, I suppose one of the worrying things for Treaty is, you know, when they look behind them, one of the teams behind them is Cork. And I suppose we will be surprised if that's how it ends up at the end of the season, and it'll be a great season for Treaty, certainly if they can finish ahead of Cork on the table. I think form, and I said it before, and having been involved with Cork a while back, form goes totally out the window in a Cork Cove game, whether it is a Munster Senior Cup or a League Cup, or now the fact that they're meeting in the league. But I think, in fairness to Cove, they've probably been a bit unlucky in games. I know they went to goal up against Athlone last week and ended up losing 2-1. You know, they were beaten by Galway at home, but they were down to 10 men, and there was 3 penalties in it. So they're thereabouts, and I'd probably go for a draw there again. The fact that it's on in Cove as well, and while Cork's results have improved, they certainly haven't hit any great heights. And the fact that they were pegged back by a late equaliser against a 10-man Galway team would just show you that they probably have a bit more to do before they're really at the form that they need to be, you know, to challenge in this league.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. Maybe I shouldn't do it with the Munster Derby first, but having some Munster bias, I suppose. But we have Athlone Town in UCD is now a very big fixture, because Athlone bounced back last week from defeat to Treaty. You know, that was a big test because they had a few results in a row. Now there's 3 defeats in a row before that game last week. They now host UCD, who are coming off the back of a result they haven't experienced much in this division at all. It's Shelburne beating them. This is probably huge, really, because if Shelburne do go on and beat Galway and Athlone and UCD, maybe that's the first time you might see a tiny gap opening up in the division, even if it is only 3 or 4 points between 2 teams and the rest. Yeah,
and I think, I mean, Athlone came back with an equaliser at the death in the first match of the season, or the first match above in the Belfield Bowl now, and this match is on Athlone, and a lot of people might crib about the artificial pitch, but UCD certainly won't, and they would do most of their training, and certainly underage in that, like most of their matches, they would have played them on the 4G pitches anyway. I'd have to say, like, from what I've seen of UCD and Athlone in the last few weeks, I think UCD are a better equipped side. Probably a bit more team bonding and cohesion between them as well. I thought that there was a lack of a kind of a team ethic in the Athlone team, and because of that, I expect UCD to bounce back with a win at the weekend.
Yeah, and on a final note of predictions, anyway, I suppose we're going to nearly call it the curse of Adrian Finnan predictions might have struck. I know it's early to be talking now, but like Cavan-Teely they've surprised more than myself, but I know me and Jason had tipped them to be bottom. I think that's already not going to happen, considering the results they've picked up. It's particularly at home. I think 4 of the 5 wins, if I'm not mistaken, have come at home for Cavan-Teely. Very strong at home. They host Wexford. But in this division, although everyone will now say maybe Cavan-Teely, if you're to look at it just on paper, should win this game, the first division's one of those where you would not be surprised to see Wexford going there and getting a 1-0 win, would it not?
No, and look, obviously, a couple of narrow defeats for Wexford, which, you know, for them are kind of like wins, you know, from where they were coming from, getting hammered 5-0 and being well beaten by Athlone. They were a bit unlucky last week. You know, Ian Ryan is in. I see Larkin Fitzgerald came on after an hour. He may well get a start. You know, they'll be going to Dublin. It isn't a massive trip for them. You just feel that at some stage they are going to get a result. And I wouldn't be surprised if they got a win at the weekend. So I'm actually hoping that they do get the 3 points, and I think it'll be good for the league as well.
I am myself. I must say, nothing against Kevin Thiele, but I do actually hope Wexford can get off the mark. I think they've lacked a lot of luck. And there's another reason for that, because if they don't get off the mark against Kevin Thiele, they'll even be more desperate after the break when they host Treaty to get off the mark. So I'd be worried about that then. So hopefully Wexford can get off the mark, to be honest. On a final note, Noel, to finish on a positive note as well, Stephen Kinney, a man who you would have been very close to in your days managing the League of Ireland, has named his Ireland squad for the upcoming friendlies with Andorra and Hungary in June, 27-man squad. We have a representative, even though we're clutching at straws, I suppose, in Chidozie Ogbene, who spent the 2017 season with us with Limerick FC, now with us, I suppose, the old Limerick FC senior side. It's obviously really positive, though, to see not just himself, I suppose. You've got Jamie McGrath, who's a former Electricity League player, come up through the ranks. You've got Danny Mandrew, who's currently at Shamrock Rovers as well. It's positive all round, and obviously we're going to claim Chidozie as well.
Yeah, I think so. Look, it's great to see him, and look, he was a fantastic player in that season. He was so exciting, and I mean, it's something that is so important, and we would have touched on last week. That bit of pace. If a guy has a bit of pace and the ability to beat someone in a 1v1, I mean, that's why people enjoy going to games. And he created a real buzz and a real excitement around Limerick. He was a brilliant signing. Hadn't really got in against, for Cork, albeit, a very, very strong Cork team, but certainly took his opportunity here and obviously has gone from strength to strength. And we'll all be rooting and hoping. It's great to see those guys come through. Danny Mandrew as well, a very, very good player, was really talented. When he was with Bohs, had a really good season and took the difficult decision, if you like, to go to Shamrock Rovers, which, the expectation there and the pressure there is even up, and he's come up with a couple of great winners for them in the last month or 6 weeks. So look, it's really good to see those guys. I see there's a great influx of European players into the under-21 squad as well. Players from the Spanish League and the German League and that. And look, hopefully they all come through in the next few years, because it would be great to see a strong Irish senior team. And it's something that has been on the slide, in fairness, for a few years. It was on the slide before Stephen got involved, and he's doing the right thing. He's, if you like, having a good clear out and having a good sweep up and letting guys, just build from the bottom. And hopefully the people stick with him and stay behind him and give him his chance, because he's a real genuine guy, and he loves Irish football, and he's certainly well capable of doing that job, which is a seriously difficult job. And everyone on the outside thinks it's easy, but it certainly isn't by any means.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't know why people would want to stick with the tried and tested of, we name a squad of experienced players and then 12 of them pull out the week of the game, which is what seems to have happened to Stephen a lot. So you can definitely can see his point in picking maybe the more inexperienced players, try and give them a run and in some international experience as well, because we have been let down, in my opinion, by more experienced players. But yeah, it's great to have another edition of the Sport Limerick Soccer Podcast. It's been another insightful evening with Noel O'Connor in my company. Again, obviously, we'll actually won't be here next week, Noel. We're going to take the break like the electricity calendar and recharge the batteries before we come back for the week before the Wexford game. Well-earned break for yourself, keeping the show on the road along with Jason throughout this. And thanks for joining us once again. Okay, we'll see you soon. And we won't be going to Lanzarote like those Premier League and First Division players for a week. The first week is always a week in Lanzarote. Yeah, unfortunately not. Rafael Rocca won't be paying for that for us.